Today we're going to look at a way to create an animation that has lots of different objects in it that are maybe a little difficult to manage, and to streamline it a little bit by making duplicates of a similar object and adding some variety. So just to put it in context, the idea is that we have these subatomic particles and we all want them to react to something in the scene. It's another particle coming down to split them apart, releasing energy. And the actual project, there's going to be loads of these things, like 20 of them or so. And to make 20 separate ones of these would be kind of a pain, although you can add as much variety as you want. But what I'm going to look at are just ways we can maybe alter just a small population of them to look like there are actually more. So there's some animation going on here. They look up. And each one of these is just one of these subcomps. So it's a very simple scene, just got a background. We've got a null object that all of these things are parented to. So if we have to move the entire bunch around, we can just use the null. So that's always the simplest thing to do to manage lots of things. You could pre-comp things in a scene to move the whole comp around, but a lot of the time it's better just to have a null and to make these children of that null and to move it around. It's just easier to manage the scene, I think. And if we look in the pre-comp here, each one is just one of these little faces with a little animation on it. And we'll create another one to add to the bunch. If we go back to our main comp, I just have one other effect that I've got turned off right now. So if I turn this up, we can see. So we've got a controller to animate them all sort of randomly too. So this is the first way we're going to add a little bit of variation to them so they're not all doing exactly the same thing. And the other thing you'll notice here is that they don't all look up at the same time. And particularly if we look at two that are obvious copies of each other, let's say the two smiling ones here with the sort of half moon mouth, if we play the animation, the one on the bottom left looks up a little bit before the one on the top right. It's the same composition, the same animation. We just offset it in our main comp here by using something called time remapping, which you're probably familiar with, but it's a handy thing just to change our animation a little bit. So I'm going to turn off the time remapping for now. I'll create it again. And they all disappeared because I have them offset. Okay, so I'm just going to create, let's say we want to add to our population here. Now, the easiest way to do it is just to duplicate one of these and make a change to it. So we can go into our project, and I already have a duplicate that I made. I'm just going to delete that one. Start again. Delete. And we'll duplicate sap2. Control D, so it's named sap3. And we can go in here, and it's set up in exactly the same way because it's a duplicate. And we've got a null object here that's used to control the animation of the face. It's just animating in position Y. So I separated the position dimensions and just animated that. And then right eye, left eye, it's the anatomical right, anatomical left, and the mouth and the body are all separate objects, just so it's easier to control. Now, if I wanted to make one from scratch, and I won't bother doing this, but if I create a new composition that's actually the size of our main comp, you may end up doing this. And if we start to create our character here, we actually don't want it the full size of the comp. And that's where we can use region of interest. So down here at the bottom of your view, there's region of interest icon, it's a square with a little rectangle in it. And if we just click around here, I guess if you have an object selected, it sets that as a region of interest. Did not know that. My computer is just firing up, so it's very slow right now. So you can select it, and then once you have it framed in the way that you want, you can go to Composition, Trim Comp to Region of Interest, and it does just that. It trims the comp down to the region of interest, and when you bring it into the main comp, it's a smaller, more manageable size. Hide that. So that was done for these ones already. So let's just change this character. So let's make this character a little bit different. go into the mouth, go into the path. This is just a very simple character mouth. I'm just going to add maybe a point here and maybe something like this. Okay. So let's delete these other keyframes. Actually, let's move this one over here so we know where it starts, and delete this keyframe. So the animation moves these up, and let's say he, she, whoever this person is, they get very upset by what's about to happen, right? Okay, that's actually a nice little overlapping action. It's almost like I planned it. Maybe I'll overshoot the mouth a little bit. If I go into the, oh, that is the value graph. So just add another keyframe. That doesn't look like the value graph. Oh, it's because I'm adjusting the path. So I will maybe just go to this point, and I'll just do it in the scene. Mouth gets a little bigger, and then it will come back down. Okay, good enough. So if we go back to our main comp, and we can bring this new character in here, and if we play the animation, one thing you'll notice is that they all look up at the same time, and this character isn't jiggling like the other one. So let's turn that off for the time being. So that's set in my null object, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so that's turned off now, I think. Yeah, there's no animation there anymore. But they all look up at the same time. And we only have one of number 3, but maybe we want 2 of these ones. So I'll duplicate it and move this one maybe to the back of the stack. And you can offer a little bit of variety just by rotating it, you know, even though it's the same character. Can't rotate it too much because they're all looking up. Still kind of works. Okay, so now we've got some variety, and I could even maybe scale this one a little bit. It's a smaller person. Okay, they're all looking up at the same time, which is what we want to avoid. But because these two, and there are pairs of the same composition throughout, just duplicates, we can't just change the animation inside the composition, but what we can do instead is time remap. So if I select all of these layers and go to Layer, Time, Enable Time Remapping, all this does is sets an in point keyframe and an out keyframe. And we can use this just to offset the timing a little bit. So if I select this one and just move this over, its animation is going to be delayed by 12 frames now. So that's this character here. So if we look, so he looks up a little bit later on. So we can just do the same thing for each of these, just offset them a little bit. So there is just some variety in the animation. So now if we play it, and actually this is a nice one to end on because it's got a little extra mouth animation that kind of adds some finality to the animation. I think they're maybe a little bit spread out. They're reacting a little too, the delay is maybe a little bit too much. So I'm just selecting the attributes. So I'm moving the in point and out point. And if you just move the in point, then it means it's going to sort of compress the animation because it will have to fit the same amount of animation in less time. Just moving this over a bit. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, so that's great. So we've got, a collection of 6 of these made out of 3 characters. And if we wanted to add more, we could. Let's say we duplicate this guy again. We can maybe at the back here. So you don't even really see the face too much. And we can offset its animation a little bit too. And one way you can also approach this is to have kind of a main character in the middle that will finalize the animation that your audience will be looking at most. Maybe there's some reason that they're looking at it more. And then the fact that there's a lot of similarity between the others maybe won't make such an impression on your audience. So you can see we're managing all of this pretty well. So now we have to, let's link these 2 new ones to our null object. So just selecting them and parenting them to the null. This way, if we move the scene around, they all move. I guess I selected the wrong one. Step 3, I missed one. This one. Okay, so now if we grab the null object, they all move around. And the other thing I have in each of these is an expression on their position. So the position of the actual precomp here. So if I hit P to show position, it's in red, which means there's an expression. And the expression is this long thing. It's a wiggle expression, and that's what's adding that shaking animation that we saw at the beginning. So normally when you write a wiggle expression, if I just hit P here, Alt click on the stopwatch, we can just start typing wiggle 3, 5. I always forget which one is frequency and which one is amplitude. So let's just make this some big number so we can see which it is. Okay, so the first one is frequency, the second one is amplitude. So we can double check that by setting the frequency to much lower. This is per second. And then the amplitude 300. This is number of pixels that it moves. So this one should jump. Yeah, big distance. Right, so he's going a little bit crazy. But what we can do instead of typing numbers in here is we can link this to a slider somewhere else. So in my null object here, I added 2 slider effects. And if you just in your effects and presets search for slider, there's a thing called slider control, and it just adds an empty slider. So you can change the value on this, but you can link other attributes to it, even from other layers, even from other compositions. So in this one, SAP3, we've got wiggle. And instead of typing these numbers in, I'll just delete them. And this doesn't always work for me, and I'm not sure why. So with the expression open, this pick whip, and with the null selected, this pick whip, I think, yeah, maybe the problem is I have to make sure I'm in there. Pick whip to the frequency slider on the null. Yes. So what happens is that it, instead of putting a number in, it refers to this comp, to the layer, and to the effect frequency slider. And then we'll do a comma, and we'll pick whip to the amplitude slider. This is what always happens to me. And I think it's when my cursor is in the wrong spot. So I'll just put a comma here. And try this again. Yes, this is what we should see, that now there's a comma separating frequency and amplitude. And it's just getting those values from the sliders, which right now are set to 0. So if I play my animation, there's no activity. But if I turn up the frequency to, let's say, 10 movements per second and turn up the amplitude to 20 pixels, then you can see they immediately jump. And if I play the animation, they all start going. Except this one. Oh, I think I put it in the last one I put in the wrong spot. Everybody probably noticed that except for me. Yes, I did put it in the wrong spot, just checking. Does this one work now? Okay, we're not getting an error. This one, okay, let's try this again. So, comma, make sure the null is selected. This is where it throws me off. When I go and make a change like that here, I gotta make sure I'm in the comma. I'm gonna put an end bracket on first. After the comma, go up to amplitude. Okay, it keeps going to the wrong spot. I probably grabbed the wrong pick whip. Okay, there we go. Okay, yes, now that character is moving too. So now you could just copy and paste this into the other ones, and since wiggle is random, they're not all moving in the same direction or the same amount each time. So since I just displayed that so poorly, let me do it again one more time. So this one still has to move. P for position, alt click on the stopwatch, type wiggle, open bracket, use the pick whip to go to the null. So here's my problem. I click away, so I've got to click in here again. Go into here, use the pick whip to go to the null, onto the word slider. Okay, that worked. Now we'll put in a comma, and we will pick whip onto the word slider under the second one. And that should be good, yes. So now I'm going to copy this and go into the final one, alt click on the position stopwatch, paste that same effect in, and we get something like this. And the benefit of this is that, you know, we can animate that slider now. So if we go back to the null object and set some keys and set these to 0 at first, and then slide over 1 second, set these back to whatever it was before, 10, 20, we'll set keys there. We can ease these if we want to. I'm not sure how apparent that will be. Right, so now the animation is that they look up first and then they become agitated. And maybe we want to time this a little bit better. So maybe they start a little bit earlier. And there you go. That's all there is to it. So this just introduced a few concepts of, you know, nesting precomps and adding variety with duplicating precomps. One thing I meant to say was you can add even more variety. So let's say this one we wanted to look a little bit different. We could add an effect here on color correction, let's say, and go to hue and saturation and just, you know, offset the hue a little bit. So we can do the same thing here if we just copy that, paste it onto the other one, and just change this. So we can easily add some variety in this way too. So duplicating comps, using time remapping to offset the shared animation, altering the rotation slightly, altering the scale slightly, using a wiggle effect so they all wiggle not in unison but sharing the same characteristics, and so on, and using a null to control them all together. So these are techniques you'll use all the time in all sorts of scenarios, not just when you're animating cartoony subatomic particles. So I hope you find this useful. Give it a shot.